Today we're going to have a look at the greatest AFL moments of all time. There's only be moments in final series games that are not grand finals, considering that we are approaching prelim final week. And next week, particularly if this video does well, I'll probably do another version of a tier maker where I go over the best grand final moments of all time. But for this video alone, just the greatest AFL finals moments, we're going to be jumping on tier maker and I'll be going through each moment. I've got around 22 moments, in my opinion, that are up there with the best. Now, I know, considering that these are the great finals moments, it's going to be difficult to sort of rank, but we sort of have to rank. So amongst these moments, they're probably all up there in the top tiers, but we're going to have to separate them. So the tiers that we've got here are best of the best, legendary, memorable, and epic. So the first moment we've got here is the Cameron Ling disallowed goal in 2010. Now, I guess considering that it was a disallowed goal and no goal was actually scored in this moment alone, I might suggest it's not as memorable of a moment as others. I know it did put the Saints to a home prelim, but yeah, maybe I'll just chuck in an epic for now. It's probably in the lower ranked tiers because if you compare them to all these other moments, it probably doesn't quite compete. Now this one is a little bit of a difficult one to rank. We've got Bailey Smith's goal in 2021, where he essentially won the game against the Lions in the semi-final. The ice in the veins moment, I reckon the celebration alone could almost bump this up to legendary. I reckon for now it's definitely memorable. It's definitely more memorable than the Ling one. It's going to be a little bit difficult to compare them and sort of judge these recent moments to moments back in the past we've long lived with for a while. But for now, I'm going to chuck it in memorable. Next up, we've got the Isaac Smith missed goal in the qualifying final in 2016 against the Cats. I feel like because it wasn't a goal, it has to go down a few ranks. Like if this was a goal, it'd probably be chucked up into legendary. You can't really fault that, a kick after sign. You don't really see it often, particularly in a final. I mean, it's definitely a memorable moment. I reckon probably end of memorable below Bailey Smith. We've got Burgoyne's goal in the 2013 prelim final to essentially seal them the win there. I mean, I think he had a pretty good last quarter kicking too. It was almost the match winner. You could argue he was the match winner. Again, I'll probably say it's a little bit less memorable than Smith's goal. I think Smith's goal, the celebration, tops it off. And I think the game was a little bit more in the balance at the time of Smith kicking it. So that's why I'm going to have that above the Burgoyne one. Billy Brownless kicking the winning goal after the siren to essentially put the Cats into a home prelim in 1994. Of course, in that year, they didn't go on to win the flag. But regardless, I reckon we chuck that in legendary because he kicked the goal. He quite simply kicked the goal. The commentary was... yeah, it was awesome as well. Billy, you are king of Geelong. I think, yeah, the two go in hand quite well, and I do think it deserves to be put in the legendary. I don't reckon quite yet best of the best. We're going to save it for a few moments, but we can't really obviously have every moment in best of the best. Daniel Bradshaw's winning goal against the Blues in the elimination final in 2009. I mean, obviously, wins in the game in the elimination final, but compared to other, match-winning goals in the dying moments, I feel like this is a bit of a forgotten goal. I reckon for now we're going to chuck an end of memorable as well. But again, we want to even these tiers out so potentially we might drop a few later on. Is this Tony Lockett's winning point to put him into the grand final? I reckon because of the fact that it was to put him into a grand final. Obviously he didn't miss it, but it doesn't matter because it was to win the game. I'd always chuck it in best of the best. But for now, we're going to chuck it in legendary. But yeah, that was the last time the Swans have played in a prelim at the MCG. And obviously this week, the Swans play the Pies at the SCG in a prelim for the first time since that moment. Imagine we see a moment like that occur in the game this week between the Swans and the Pies. Brent Daniels' goal to win the game. I feel like it wasn't as memorable as the goal that Smith kicked in 2021, but it was sort of in similar fashion. And the goal he kicked was actually pretty, difficult to kick. I think it was a snap around the body. I might check it below the Isaac Smith miss. I guess because of the fact that it was a Giants player that kicked it, it wasn't as memorable. No one really talks about it as much. I'm sure if it was a Collingwood player, people would be talking about that moment a lot more. Next up, we got Lance Franklin's dribbler in 2011. I know they didn't go on to win the game. I think for now, we'll chuck it above Bailey Smith's goal. I mean, that was an incredible goal. It probably should have put him into a grand final. That probably almost deserved the win. Obviously, they didn't go on to win it. The game the Pies did through Luke Ball, which I could argue could put in this list, but I decided not to because it was sort of in the same game. But Franklin's dribbler was one of his best goals he's ever kicked. Now, Luke Shuey's kick after the sight. The game in itself was one of the great games I've ever seen in a final. It went to a draw. An extra time, that obviously didn't disappoint, and it ended up being a kick after sight to Luke Shuey. He sunk the goal. He broke the hearts of all the Port supporters and Port players, and it was an away territory as well. Obviously, the Eagles didn't really do much after that, lost in the semi-final, but the moment itself almost matches with the Tony Lockett point, but because it was only to put him through to a semi, not to a granny, I reckon the Tony Lockett point was a little bit more legendary. We're going to keep them both at legendary. I definitely reckon that was better than the Brownless goal. Next up, we got Fraser Brown's tackle, which essentially put the Blues into the 1999 grand final. I think it has to go straight up to legendary, like it's in footy folklore, to be honest. It wasn't a goal, but it was still a tackle, and we can't really take that lightly, to be honest. So, yeah, I do think we'd probably chuck it in the... Well, because it was to put him into the grand final, we're going to have it above the Luke Shuey moment, to be honest. Then this mark, I forgot it was taken in a semi-final. I thought it was just a regular standard mark in the home and away season, but tell you what, it's a very underrated mark. Because of the fact that it was in a final, it just makes it that much better. Aaron Edwards' mark in the 2007 semi-final, I reckon it has to be memorable, but I'm not quite sure if it was in legendary, only because of the fact that no one really talks about it that much. It was quite underrated, and I'm pretty sure this mark got awarded as mark of the year, which I'm not too sure if nowadays they award mark of the years to the ones taken during the finals. Next up, we got Drew Petrie's 2 last quarter goals in the dying stages of the Elam against the Bombers. I reckon because of the celebration alone, you can't have it in the epic tier. I reckon you could almost chuck it up in memorable. Like, you can't really have it too high because it doesn't really quite compete with all the other moments, but I'll tell you what, I was watching this live and it was fantastic, the way he kicked those snaps around the body. I reckon we'll chuck it above the Bradshaw goal. It potentially could change. It could almost be above the Daniels goal, to be honest. In fact, I reckon it was. Big game, big crowd at the MCG. You got to chuck it above the Daniels goal. Now, we've sort of saved the best of the best position, sort of for the best in a way. We haven't really got any in that tier yet, but I reckon we've got to chuck in the Nick Davis 4 goals in the last quarter. I think that's probably the greatest finals moment. I reckon there are probably better grand final moments, but better non-grand final finals moment that I think we've ever seen. 4 goals in the last quarter of a semi-final. They went on to win the flag as well, and that was in front of a home crowd, but they only had 3 goals to their tally up until 3/4 time. It was just the way he kicked them, and the commentary as well. Definitely got to go on best of the best. The Mason Cox just sort of rampage in the second quarter to tear the Tigers away. I reckon probably has to go on the legendary spot. I mean, it puts them into the grand final in an upset. I think we all, watching that game, I think we all thought the Tigers were going to get the job done, which they didn't. I reckon it almost goes above the Fraser Brown tackle, but I can see why you wouldn't have it there because it was in the second quarter. It wasn't really a particular moment. I reckon actually, no, we'll chuck it down below the Billy Brownless goal. I reckon we have it end of legendary, but one of the great moments. I reckon we got to have it in legendary. Lance Franklin's sealer, essentially, to put the Hawks through to a semi in 2007. I don't care what you say about it being only an elimination final. I don't really think it matters that much. It was breathtaking. He kicked 7 goals as well. No one knew how much time there was to go. I reckon you've got to have it almost above Shuey's. I reckon above Brownless's, but we'll have it below Shuey's just because I remember the Shuey moment more, and it was a goal after the sign. It was a little bit more clutch, but again, the degree of difficulty kicking outside 50, and he kicked 7 in that game as well. You could definitely make a claim for it being higher up. I think this was the 2013 qualifying final where Hill kicked that goal running off the interchange bench, putting them into their first home preliminary final. I reckon we chuck it above the Edwards mark. But I don't think it was quite legendary because you look at all these legendary moments, you got kicks after signs, sort of moments that won them the game. Whereas this moment, it was to seal them the game and it was also in a qualifying final as well. This is Fraser Gehrig's 100th goal in the prelim final. Now during that time period, 100 goals wasn't as rare as it is now. I could probably chuck it in the same tier as the Lloyd. I reckon no one really talks about the Lloyd moment because he kicked 100 goals quite a few seasons, to be honest. I'm going to chuck the Lloyd 100 goals in the epic position. Maybe because Gehrig only kicked 100 goals once. It was in a prelim, was in a sort of a tighter game. I might chuck that in epic. We'll probably chuck it a little bit higher. We'll chuck it in the memorable moments. Danaher's goal. Now, it's going to be difficult to rank Danaher's goal, to be honest, because it just happened. It was 2 weeks ago. How are you supposed to, rank Danaher's goal alongside the likes of Franklin's dribble or the Burgoyne goal? Is it better than Bailey Smith's goal? I don't think the celebration was better, so because of that, I'm going to chuck it below the Smith goal. Nick Rewald's toe poke. I could be a little bit biased, but that was to put him to a granny, wasn't it? But again, is that legendary? It is legendary, but I don't think it's better than the Franklin goal, even though it didn't put them into the grand final. Again, I might just chuck it here. And then the O'Loughlin goal as well. That almost might be memorable as well. I mean, this is a shocking tier maker. We're going to have to change a few positions. I reckon we have the O'Loughlin goal. We're going to chuck it somewhere memorable as well. I reckon definitely more memorable than... I reckon it's probably more memorable than the Rewald goal, to be honest. Like the fan encounter at the end as well there puts him into a prelim as well. And it was sort of the embodiment of the rivalry between these two sides. We're going to chuck up another Swans moment, the Franklin goal. And I reckon the Shuey goal. This could be a slight recency bias because I didn't really get to witness this live, but it's my opinion regardless. I might bump up the Cox mark and grab up a little bit, and I reckon, because he didn't win them the game, the Franklin goal, we're not going to chuck it up in legend. We're going to chuck 3 up in Legendary. The Stephen Hill goal deserves to be there. The Lochman goal. And we'll chuck the Reebok goal as well. And then to drop a few down in Epic, we'll go Bradshaw, Daniels, and I reckon Isaac Smith, because it was a miss after the sign, but it was still quite an epic moment. So, you know what? I'm not too sure if I can say I'm happy with this, but it's the best I'm going to do. It's definitely a subjective list that I could spend ages on, but we ain't got all day here, and I thought I'd make it short and snappy. So, that was my list. If there's a moment that you think deserves to be in this list, let me know. Honestly, I just sort of went through the ones that I could remember. There were probably moments back in the old days I just can't really remember. If you want to, give a go at this, I'll chuck the link in the description. I did make it myself, so, if you give me a shout out, that's all good. And, yeah, if this video, let's say, gets over 10,000 views or go 600 likes, if it gets over that, we'll do another one for the grand final. So, best grand final moments during grand final week. Got a lot of content coming out grand final week, so stay tuned for that as well. And this could be a part of it, the grand final tier maker. So, appreciate everyone for watching the video, and we'll see you very soon in my next one.